Quick heads up before I start, I am using a different microphone because it looks like mine has died. If this doesn't sound great, sorry about that. Quite often, while reading a book that I'm excited to talk about and review, an adjective will pop into my head that kind of sums up the book's vibe. It's not a great way to do things because summing up an entire work of art with one adjective is, I guess, kind of demeaning, and that's why it annoys me when tabloids review books and they say things like a page turner or a triumph. Why is everything a triumph? How can every novel be a triumph, Daily Mail? But it happens nonetheless. Not with every book, but some books just have a certain vibe that can kind of be summed up in a single adjective. For The Vaster Wilds, that adjective is immersive. This is one of the most immersive novels I have ever read in my entire life. It's a novel that draws the reader in so intensely and so completely that you forget you're reading a book. You might have had this. You might have had this a whole bunch of times. Maybe it depends on what kind of a reader you are or what kind of books you read, but immersion happens, and it really happened with this. Those times when you're reading a book and suddenly a sound behind you or something in your peripheral vision pulls you out of the book and you realize you've been reading a novel this whole time. You remember that you are you and you are not the protagonist or a voyeur in this world. You are in fact a person reading a book. That happened to me many times while reading this incredibly immersive novel. That feeling of flow state that you get while playing a video game, I had repeatedly while reading The Vaster Wilds. And that immersion is down to two things. One is Lauren Groff's language. The way that she writes is immaculate. It is, I would argue, perfect. Her command of language invites you in and immerses you in the world. The tone, the setting, and the mind of the character. And the other reason it's so immersive is that with The Vaster Wilds, Lauren Groff has been able to perfectly imitate the way a human mind typically behaves. You know, when you're doing a household chore, you're washing the dishes, you're sorting clothes and putting things away, or maybe you're walking down the street with your headphones on, and so many things are passing through your mind. Random memories that the things you see and hear are conjuring up, or things that you remember you need to do, or just daydreaming. Our minds flit from thing to thing, from past to present all the time. And The Vaster Wilds manages to mimic that to the point that you forget that you are you, and you start to feel like you live in the mind of this protagonist. This is where you live. And to be pulled out of that mind is disorientating, honestly, because the book is so immersive through its language and its setting and its tone and its mimicry of thought and feeling and perspective. So what's it about? The Vaster Wilds tells the story of a nameless girl. Although a few times in flashbacks she is nicknamed Zed, but the narration just calls her the girl. It's the 1600s, she's originally from London, and she was put on a ship to the New World. And up until the beginning of the novel, she's been living in an English colony, presumably in New England. But that colony has been hit with a famine that is killing people off one by one. She's starving, she's cold, she's afraid, and when the novel opens, she has left. She has fled from this settlement. And you can tell from the tone, from what she's thinking, that something pushed her out. There is a reason she chose to escape in the dead of night. And you find out what that is later in the novel. But that's really the only thing that could be spoiled. This is not a novel of plot. It is mostly a story of her wandering through the wilderness. She has chosen to head north to try and find other people. She's heard that French people are colonizing somewhere in the north. And she knows a bit of French, so she goes, okay, well, I have to go there. So she just wanders through the wilderness. It's kind of like Cormac McCarthy's The Road, where so much of the novel is just walking and describing what you see, what you feel, what you hear, what you come up against. We follow her journey through the Vaster Wilds. So that's half the novel, is just describing what happens to her as she's walking, as she's starving, the things that she sees, the experiences she has, her feelings of desperation, of fear, of sorrow, of loneliness. And then the other half is flashbacks. Like I said, this book mimics how you feel or what you think about as you're walking or as you're doing chores. We flashback constantly into different aspects and different moments of her life. And through those flashbacks, we learn about who the girl is, or I guess more accurately, who she was. These flashbacks can happen in feverish dreams, or they can just be daydreams that she has. And we slowly learn about her life in London, her life on the boat, and her life in the settlement. We learn early on that she was a servant girl to a mistress, a nameless woman who divorced her first husband and married a minister. This mistress has a daughter called Bess, and our girl is kind of a servant to Bess. She helps the mistress keep Bess going because Bess is a bedridden and sickly girl. She never says a word in any of these flashbacks. She just exists and she's sick and she's probably going to die. But our girl loves Bess. She looks after her with the mistress. But they were taken to this new world by the minister, a man with delusions of grandeur, a pathetic creature who wanted a larger flock, who wanted to take Jesus to the new world, spread the gospel, and feel bigger than he really is, larger than life. And because he's a man with an ego problem, he's dragged the women and the children of his life over there with him. And now they're all starving, now there's a famine, and for some reason our girl has fled. And so, like I said, the novel is just her walking through the wilderness, trying to stave off starvation and the cold, and flashing back to her thoughts, feelings, and memories of the past. We learn about who she was, and we are entirely immersed in her life, in her mind, in everything she experiences. The immersion of this novel is incredibly intense. And I think I'll read you the first page to give you an idea of that language and why I felt so immediately immersed in the story through the way that Groff tells it. The moon hid itself behind the clouds. The wind spat an icy snow at angles. In the tall black wall of the palisade, through a slit too seeming thin for human passage, the girl climbed into the great and terrible wilderness. Over her face she wore a hood drawn low, and she was slight, both bony and childish small. But the famine had stripped her down yet starker to root and string and fibre and sinew. Even so starved and blinded by the dark, she was quick. She scrabbled upright, stumbling with her first step, nearly fell, but caught herself and began to run, going fast over the frozen ruts of the field and all the stalks of dead corn that had come up in the summer, already sooty and fruitless and stunted with blight. Swifter, girl, she told herself, and in their fear and anguish her legs moved yet faster. Oh my God. I found this so incredibly immersive. I keep saying it, but as the book went on, I started to forget who I was and where I was, and I was just reading. I read this over the course of 2 afternoons with headphones on, listening to a load of doom metal that seemed to really fit the vibe, at least for me. And I truly did have no idea where I was at times. Partly it was down to the language, and partly it was this mimicry of how we think and feel as we go about our lives. And this is also a novel of intense introspection. There are so many moments where the girl starts to wrestle with what she thought was true. Big concepts about nation and identity, and about religion and God. She wrangles with her feelings about God several times in this novel, and it gets increasingly intense as it goes. For example, I think it's around halfway through, it's the middle of the night, and she sees a bear. Starlight and moonlight is illuminating the area, it's making the fur of the bear shimmer, the water is glowing, and the bear is staring at a waterfall. And she is sure, as she watches this bear, as she watches its face, as she sees the intensity of its expression, she's confident that this bear is in awe of what it's seeing, captivated by the beauty of a waterfall. And she thinks in this moment that if a bear can experience awe, then a bear can understand God, that a bear has a soul. She thinks back in that moment to a time in London where she was in a cathedral, she was listening to a sermon, the light was coming in through the stained glass window, and she felt holy, she felt connected to God, she felt in awe, this feeling that Gothic authors called the sublime, this intense attraction to beauty, landscape, nature, the impossible aesthetic beauty of the world around us. She felt in awe in that church, and the bear, she's sure, is feeling in awe at nature. And so she has to start rethinking what she's been taught by the Bible, by these preachers, by her religion. Suddenly she's thinking about how man doesn't have dominion over everything, because if a bear has a soul and can feel what a human feels, then it too has dominion. And she suddenly starts to feel guilty over the idea of hunting and killing and eating animals because they too have souls. And then she starts to realize that we as Europeans had no reason, had no place, had no excuse for invading and settling in and colonizing the Americas. The excuses that these religious fundamentalists gave for colonizing, for disrupting the lives of other people, for murdering them. The excuse that the Europeans were bringing Jesus and God to the New World. She sees through all of that suddenly. Because if God is in this bear, if the bear can commune with God through nature and feel awe, then God is already here in this land, in this new world. You don't need to bring God to people. God is everywhere and in everything. And she starts to rethink her attitude towards religion and re-experience what God is, reframe her concept of God. And it is beautiful to read. It is existential and gorgeous, and I really, really appreciated it. And it's expressed really naturally, and it feels like something that in that moment she would think and feel. I was amazed. I thought it was incredible that Lauren Groff was able to bring in various important political, religious, and feminist themes into this book, while the book at its core is just a starving, hungry girl running from something and wandering through the wilderness for 250 pages. And in that time, the themes that she brings up, the things that she thinks about, it all fits without feeling tacked on in any way. And that's the magic of what Lauren Groff writes. This is a wonderfully immersive novel. I felt so much. I forgot who and where I was while I was reading it. I was drawn in completely by the language, by the storytelling, by the way that she frames the mind and the experiences of this girl. It was incredible. Wow. Now it's time for my Patreon book recommendation of the week. Something I haven't done for a few weeks while I got all settled in, and now I'm ready to jump back in. This recommendation comes from Adam Cook, and it sounds like something that is very, very much up my street, and I need to get to it soon. But it also comes with a really lovely story that Adam has told, and I'm going to share it with you. Years ago, I was in a huge reading slump. No matter how many times I tried rereading my absolute favourites like a Game of Thrones, but nothing could make me stick with it. So I forced myself to join a book club. My thinking was that if I feel obligated to read something on a time limit, I might get the desire back. A lovely member of the club told me she had a stack of books she was getting rid of and asked if I would like them. I naturally accepted, but had no positive expectations. This proved to be exquisite luck. One of the books was a very battered novel called The Meaning of Night by Michael Cox. I'd never heard of this book or the author, but the synopsis sounded like it was made for me. After killing the red-haired man, I took myself off to Quinn's for an oyster supper. So begins the extraordinary story of Edward Gliver, book lover, scholar, and murderer. As a young boy, Gliver always believed he was destined for greatness. A chance discovery convinced him that he was right. Greatness does await him, along with immense wealth and influence. Overwhelmed by his discovery, he will stop at nothing to win back a prize that he knows is rightfully his. Gliver's path to reclaim his prize leads him from the depths of Victorian London with its foggy streets, brothels, and opium dens to Evenwood, one of England's most beautiful and enchanting country houses, and finally to a consuming love for the beautiful but enigmatic Emily Carteret. His is a story of betrayal and treachery, of death and delusion, of ruthless obsession and ambition. And at every turn, driving Glyver irresistibly onward is his deadly rival, the poet-criminal Phoebus Rainsford Daunt. That's a name. To this day, I am enamored by this novel. It simultaneously provides a Jack the Ripper-esque stalking through the fog mystery, as well as an epic, heartbreaking romance. It reads like a much older novel than it actually is, as though it were a lost piece of classic literature. Every revelation and story beat impaled my heart for the entirety of the 700-ish pages. I've never read anything like it, before or since, and to this day I can honestly say it is one of the best novels I have ever read. I am haunted by this book. Wow. Thank you, Adam. In so many ways and for so many reasons, that sounds like a book I need to read. A romantic, mystery, historical novel, absolutely, yes please. So I'll check that out if you go check out The Vaster Wilds. Another complete masterpiece from Lauren Groff. And subscribe for books.